Miscellaneous minds, never explaining the minds. Devilish grin for my alias, aliens who respond. Peddling sin, thinking maybe when you get old you realize I'm not gonna fold or demise. I don't smoke crack, motherfucker, I sell it.
What is going on, everybody? This is the Miscellaneous Minds Podcast. I'm your co-host, Puma El Gato, the cat that gives you your happiness back. And to right over here is the main man who's the narrow, the man that makes the fat stacks. Together we form the dynamic duo that won't die. Deadly Ideas Brothers and spicier content than your girls' only fans.
What's up, y'all? Before we get into tonight's topic, please remember to hit that like button, subscribe, hate, comment, all that good stuff. We're going to be talking about a particular thing that's kind of been on my mind. I brought it up to my partner here not that long ago, and we kind of both reviewed a few different studies. What we're going to be talking about tonight is the female happiness paradox. Now, some of you may be asking, what the hell is the female happiness paradox? So, the female happiness paradox is a study that was done over the last, I guess now what it'd be?
40 years about.
40 years about. Basically, it's a self-reporting study from women, basically going over the happiness over the last four decades. So basically, this study started back in the 70s, right after women were given the right to own their own homes, to get their own credit cards without needing a man, so on and so forth. So basically, they've been wanting to track, now that women have all these additional rights, over the course of, the last 40 years, it's kind of been tracking how their happiness has either gone up, gone down, wherever it may be. Now, the number one thing that kind of struck me right from the get-go is that, let's just get to it. Women's happiness has actually been going down. Ever since women got all of these rights, women's happiness has consistently. Now, some people may say, well, maybe men's has as well. Actually, men's is continuously going up. It goes up and up and up, right, until you get in your 40s. Once you hit your 40s, it kind of stabilizes, kind of stables off, and then it kind of stays that way for a good period of time. Doesn't drop or anything like that, whereas, unfortunately, women seems to just go down as time goes on and on and on. Now, there's a number of different theories that, different little organizations have come up with. There was one that I saw from Vice basically stating, well, maybe part of the reason that women are less happy now, even though they have more rights, is because they can see what they're missing out on. I call this a bullshit excuse, because if someone told me, hey, my man, there's people making $1 million out there, that doesn't deter me from wanting to make more money. Hell no, in fact, it encourages me. I want it more. And now that this has been going on for, again, the last 40 years, this is self-reporting. So this isn't like some sort of biased study by any means. It's women telling, yeah, I've grown less happy. Women that have joined the workforce that are now able to hold the same positions, for some reason, it seems like their happiness levels are going down. Now, before we get into a few more of those details, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my man here.
So as far as numbers go, again, this was actually it was a report that was, the data was taken from something called the General Social Survey, which is GSS. Again, self-reported survey. It was done by women that were self-reporting their own happiness. They had a scale in which they were asking a whole bunch of people, both men and women, how would you rate your life satisfaction, with not so happy, pretty happy, or way happy. And it looked like from 1972 is when they started collecting all this data, because 1972 and 1973, that's about right when Roe v. Wade was just put into put into law. So it said around 1972, 1973, 1974, the average around this time for women's happiness was 37% were reported to be way happier with their life satisfaction. Around 30 years later, however, around 2004 to 2008, that number dipped by about 5.8%. So it looked like they were about, 31%-ish that they were reported to be less happier than they were 30 years ago. For context, over that 30-year time span, men's happiness, about way happier, their rating, only dipped about 2.1%. So it looked like women's happiness dipped way significantly more than men's happiness over the years. So that was a context as far as the numbers go, as far as general satisfaction with life.
It's funny because you would think, again, that we've discussed it on the show before, the feminism of the 1970s was true feminism in the sense of they were really fighting to give women these rights. And shortly thereafter, there was a breakthrough in a lot of these things. Again, being able to own a home, being able to get a credit card without a man, so on and so forth. The women's liberation movement of the 1970s really just focused on them getting a lot of these additional rights. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect by any means. But as we've seen over the last 40 years, this study just goes to show is that despite now being allowed to pursue really any job in the workforce, despite being able to again own property, have credit cards, pursue really anything that you want, the glass ceiling is not no longer really there for women. It's a little bit of an interesting thing to see why they've gone down. Now there's a number of things that have gone on. I just going to throw in a second ago. Another one is basically now women are seeing the brunt of the workforce. They're seeing the brunt of the stress. They're seeing because they've not had to deal with it for God knows how long now that they do have to deal with it. They're basically seeing that, hey, it's not as easy as we thought it was, whereas, men having to go to work, we basically staying at home with the kids, so on and so forth. It's funny because one of the things that feminism fought so hard for was the women's sexual revolution, basically where women can go ahead and freely pursue sexual relationships just like a man could. Now, it's funny because that same study and additional studies go to show that it's actually not even women that are benefiting from the women's sexual movement. It's actually more men. Think about it in real, just simple terms. If before men had to court you, date you, meet your family, so on and so forth, whereas now the reality is they don't need to do that. If you're willing to say, hey, I just want to have free, guilt-free sex without any issues, I mean, really women are not really winning, their men are. Now, another reason is that when it comes to being sexually free, women obviously have the burden of having a pregnancy. And when you tell a man, hey, I don't want anything to do with you, I just want to have quick, casual sex, the man says, okay, that's perfectly fine with me. He goes off and now you're pregnant. You've kind of taken on a responsibility by your own doing. Again, this just goes to show that this is one of those issues that it's one of those dark things that's not talked about. Oh yeah, sexually free, blah blah. Great, awesome. And despite it's a little bit less accepted now given what was going on recently with the Supreme Court. But basically, being able to have an abortion gives you all the right to basically, if you don't want to not have that child, or it did for the last 34 years. With that being said, women chose not to. A lot of women chose not to, and that's why they're facing the brunt of these types of issues. Want to add something to that, my man?
Yes, I wanted to add something that was a little bit more of an interesting statistic to add for those women that were saying that their happiness was that they were reported way happier with their life satisfaction around the 70s and 80s, because that seemed to be the apex of where we are. The peak of where that is. Now, the fascinating thing that I found about that is I think there was a poll done by some organization called Motherlies, and they wanted to get a little bit of a study of what these women's situations were like in terms of their happiness level. They described it as there was 4 groups of women that were reporting these happinesses and what they had influenced them. The two strongest ones was the relationship with their career and their family, which led their statistics to have 4 groups of women. Women that had no career and no family to take care of. Women that had a career and no family to take care of. Women that had no career but had a family, and women that had both a career and a family. All over in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s. The number grew for all of them, but the trend still was consistently the women that were the most happiest were the women that had no career and taking care of a family. In other words, the women that were the most happiest were the homemakers. And the only one that trailed behind those was women that were having both a career and a family to take care of. And the part that I found fascinating about that is even the people that said that they were trying to do both, they said that they experienced more burnout if they were doing both at the same time, and found that they were substantially more happier if they went back to doing the stay-at-home mom thing. So they actually found more satisfaction from being a stay-at-home mom, more so if they had just quit their job recently, which I think is really, really fascinating.
It's definitely interesting. I'm going to actually use a particular quote here from this particular study. It's the study of life satisfaction of career women and housewives. The study itself says women are now marrying later in life and at lower rates, having fewer children and working more outside of the household. So again, the career woman. Career women are the new normal, and housewifery has gone out of fashion. At the same time, women have become less happy. Now, this isn't just this particular study. This is also used U.S. Census data, a number of different factors to kind of determine, if it's gone down or up. And the more, it's weird because the more freedom women get, it seems the less happier they are. Now, don't get me wrong. there's apart from these particular studies, because I read about 4 or 5 studies, there's a number of different factors. Again, the being able to pursue careers, having to stay later at work, having home obligations that you didn't have before. So think about it. Women are getting married either later on in life or not getting married at all. So let's say you're by yourself, no kids, no nothing. Well, if you're staying at work later, which you're not doing because you're a career woman, naturally that's going to come with more stress from work, not being able to spend as much time at home to, be able to indulge in your own particular activities, whatever those may be. So of course that comes with a little bit less happiness. Now let's say you chose to embrace the sexual freedom. Let's say you slept, with a couple different dudes, got, a baby out of it. Now you're at home, also working, and you have this child by yourself in which you're raising on your own. So of course that causes the difficulty of the home, difficulty you already have at work, so on and so forth. So, honestly, you don't even really need to go into the studies, but we've provided you with a few here just because, again, it's interesting that the more freedom women have gone and the things that they specifically asked for, being able to own property, being able to engage in casual sex, being able to pursue a career, being able to, all the things that they've asked for have actually brought them less happiness. Now, we've talked about this before on a couple different things. Generally speaking, women that choose to pursue careers usually go into the social sciences. They're nurses, they're teachers, different things where they're basically having one-on-one human interaction, interacting with a number of individuals, so on and so forth. The reason that these fields are predominantly women is because science has shown that women generally prefer the social interaction that comes with this, whether it's social work, again, being a nurse, all these types of things. So, of course, it's easy to kind of connect the dots when a woman says, you know what, I'm not going to have a baby, I'm going to strictly to my job, and then you don't get as much satisfaction from a job because let's keep it 100% honest here. At a job, it's kind of a superficial relationship with the people around you. Sure, they're your coworkers. I wouldn't really consider a lot of my coworkers friends, not to be a hater or anything like that, but you got to keep up that level of a wall between your personal life and your coworkers, should something happen. The women that decide to, again, embrace the sexual freedom, that have the children at home, but they don't have a partner to help them out anymore, it makes natural sense that if you're doing it by yourself, life gets a little bit harder. There's a little bit more added stress. And then on top of that, you have your regular work duties. So, of course, again, it doesn't even really need to be thought too much of. It's just the fact of being single and having additional responsibilities, of course, would bring on a certain level of stress, which then would bring down your happiness. Now, again, a lot of people ask, okay, well, what's it like for men? Men don't feel that way. Men, even if they're experiencing the same thing, again, men have been the primary benefiters of the woman's sexual movement because, again, instead of having to court a woman, instead of meeting their family, instead of having to go through all that process, women are saying now, well, I just want to have some casual sex. Of course, men aren't going to fight that. And because a lot of times fathers are pushed out or basically told, hey, we just had casual sex, I don't want you in the picture, they don't have the responsibility having to take care of the children. Even then, when they do, generally speaking, at least it was in the past, it's starting to change now a little bit, but women were predominantly the ones that were getting the children whenever there was some sort of custody battle. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see that these statistics kind of flow out that way. I'm going to let you jump in and get a word, my man.
Another thing that I also found crazy was that when we talk about this, we're particularly talking about women in the Western world, the United States and all that. But apparently there was one other nugget of information that I found was interesting was according to a Gallup poll, and this was by a lot of people's admission with a country that allows women the most freedoms would be Sweden and Switzerland. They were the ones that were going to be the most liberating. They were the ones that promised more job prosperity for women in the workplace, all that, blah, 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 blah. And according to a Gallup poll, they actually polled their happiness levels. And what they found was that women that were reporting their self-happiness in well-developed countries actually polled lesser than women that were reporting their happiness in rural areas. Interestingly enough, there's a subsect in that information that found that women in countries that were predominantly Christian and Catholic actually were reporting their happiness less than in countries that were practicing Buddhism and all that. And it's fascinating to me because it's one of those things where we're going back to where even though that all these women were getting all these freedoms, they were in countries that were more developed and offering more opportunities for women, they were reporting their happiness less than women that were in countries that didn't promise as much of those things and were practicing more traditional roles, which I think is astounding because we're going back to that study about women getting more happiness, getting more fulfillment from being a homemaker, which is kind of harrowing, at least to me, or at least it should be to women, just because it seems like all the stuff that feminism has been promising all these women that they're going to get more happiness from getting more opportunities. It seems to be proving the opposite.
Yeah, my man, it's definitely interesting because, you know, even reading some of the results right now, what the studies show is that, generally speaking, amongst the vast majority of women, it just goes to show that a lot of the things, like you said, that feminism was promoting, it's just not. Women don't derive happiness from those things. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's one or two female out there saying, "Oh, well, you guys are fucking tripping. I'm definitely happy being single with my own job and by myself and with my kid." Blah blah blah. We're talking about the vast majority, though. And here's the thing. Keep in mind, this is self-reporting. Generally speaking, women don't derive happiness from these things. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a stay-at-home wife. I'm not saying you can't, go into casual sex. I'm not saying none of that. You do you. You have the freedom to do that. What I am saying is that the studies are showing that women generally are not deriving happiness from these things. Think about it. Women went from a scenario where they were sitting at home and they were taking care of the kids, or if they didn't have kids, they were taking care of the home, and that was really the extent of the stress. I'll be honest with you. I personally don't derive happiness from strictly being at home. I derive happiness from achievements, from getting ahead in my career, so on and so forth. So I can't identify with that, but the studies show that women were at their peak happiness when they had these things, when they were stay at home, when they were, attending to the kids, tending to the home, all that kind of stuff. And it makes sense because, again, what's better, just this easy. What's better? Would you rather spend time with your family, have a good time, or would you rather be at work with people that you don't really want to be with, dealing with the stresses of the everyday? Again, it's not even, yes, the studies are needed to prove the point, because I wouldn't want it to be just my word. And here's the thing. Please, everybody out there that's watching this, go out there, look up the female happiness paradox. Just look up that. Women's happiness paradox. Just go look it up. Do your own research. Don't take our word for it. It's interesting that all of these things that were promised women, that once you have this, because they thought they were going to derive happiness just like men do. But women and men value two different things when it comes to these types of things. So it's interesting to see that all the things that feminism had promised, they're not deriving that happiness from it. They're not getting that fulfillment from it. And again, it makes sense. I'll be 100% honest with you. I like my career. I wouldn't say I get all my happiness from it. But with that being said, it's definitely interesting to see these types of things and the dynamic that it has between men and women. It's funny because I only read one or two studies where, generally speaking, as women got less happy, became more unhappy, and some of these groups, they admitted to trying to bring their partner down to their happiness level, even though their partner men were generally rating their happiness at a higher level. And that's really interesting, because here's the thing. If you want to be miserable, that's on you. But to bring me down just because you're miserable, that's some hateful shit. I'm going to let you get in the last word, my man.
Yeah, and to pair it off of that, if you look at the trend, especially from the 70s and 80s, that trend actually tends to be pretty perpendicular. And what I mean by that is that we've established, again, from the 70s and 80s, women's happiness has been going down. Now, related to that, divorce rates have gone up. Now, that can't be a coincidence, especially if we're taking women's happiness into account. And like you were saying about the longer that the marriage goes, more statistically, women's happiness and satisfaction in the marriage tends to go down, whereas men, it does go down a bit, but not as nowhere near as steep as women goes. So if they're feeling like they need to divorce because they feel a need to they no longer derive happiness and satisfaction from marriage, they're more likely to divorce. Basically, what all these numbers are saying is that a woman is more likely to divorce you if she feels that she is less happier than you. So that's why what he was talking about was that she's more likely to divorce you, or at the very least try and bring your happiness level down equal to hers. That way she's less likely to divorce you. So in other words, if you don't want to get divorced, be miserable, I guess. I don't know what else to tell you. It's beyond weird that this thing that this happens, and there's no other really recourse for it other than stay at home, I guess. Like what can we really do to fix this?
Look, here's the thing that I'm going to be honest about. I think there's a certain level of hypocrisy, because again, these are self-reported, right? These are women saying that these are the facts. These are true. I am not as happy as I was, 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it may be. And it's interesting because you guys are getting everything that you want. You guys, again, You can be by yourself, buy property by yourself, get credit cards by yourself. You guys can have children. You guys can enjoy casual sex like men. All of these things. You know, it's funny because I watched a video earlier, and I know that you'll probably know what I'm talking about. I watched a video earlier, and the video was based on a meme where there was a lawn chair and a TV. That was it. And there was a bunch of women criticizing, saying, how can a man be happy with just this? And I think that goes to the crux of our argument here, the crux of the studies. I think it really points something out. Men are easy to make happy. I know a lot of women will say, oh, no, they're not. They gotta cheat, and they gotta this, and they gotta that. And we've gone over the statistics. Yes, in early life, teens, early 20s, men do cheat more. But as time goes on, women cheat more. So, no, it's not that. Men are simple creatures. We want to go to work. We want to have fun. We want to be with our family. It's pretty simple stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. Men are different. So, obviously, some men will derive more happiness from a little bit more of work. Some will derive a little bit more from having fun. Some a little bit more from family, so on and so forth. But the statistics overwhelmingly show. And it's, again, the statistics are based off women self-reporting. Ladies, you guys got to get your house together. You guys need to start understanding, do I really want this? Is this really what I want for myself? Or would I be happy, maybe being a homemaker? And here's the thing. I'm not here to advocate any conservative shit. Again, I'm not conservative. But you know what I'm also not? I'm not against the facts. And the facts are that these studies and your own self-reporting, ladies, goes to show that you guys aren't deriving happiness from the things that you were told you would derive happiness from. Do you guys really want to be working by yourself, taking kid by yourself for the next 30, 40, 50 years? Is that really where you derive happiness from? Because I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't derive happiness from that. With that being said, my man, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Nah, I'm good, brother.
All right, with that, again, please like, comment, subscribe, hate, talk shit. I don't give a fuck. Whatever you need to do, just get on here and start doing it. And with that being said,
until next time, get rest and stay blessed. We'll see you on the next one.